forward 3 new initiatives that you have. $3.5 million within the Industry Partnerships Program for an initiative to invest in Pennsylvania's workforce, $1 million as a transfer to the Vocational Rehabilitation Fund, and $3.5 million as a new initiative for the Schools to Work appropriation to grow career and tech education. And I think that's something that's important to many of us. So I know that's going to be an ongoing theme throughout this hearing. So we look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right. Before we begin testifying, if you could all stand so I can swear everybody in. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? Thank you so much. Always good to see our good friend and former member, Representative Jerry Mullery, here. Welcome back to the House. In the middle of the table is our timekeeper. When it turns green, that means that our members have 5 minutes to ask a question. They will proceed with their questions for 5 minutes. When it turns yellow, that means that there are 30 seconds left. We ask that you try to conclude with your comments at 30 seconds. And when it turns red, that means that time has expired. We will do our best to keep within our 5 minutes, as we would like to get to as many members and as many questions as possible. Secretary, would you like to have introductory comments, or would you like to go right into questions?
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Thank you, Chairman Struzzi. I will rely on our extensive written comments and not reiterate them here or speak them here, but I wanted to thank everybody in the chamber for their continued cooperation and collaboration in helping us to do good things with the dollars that you give us to administer. I'd also like to thank the thousands of workers of the Department of Labor and Industry that get the good work of the people of Pennsylvania done every day. So with that, I'm happy to take questions.
All right, let's start. Representative Khan.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Thank you, Secretary Walker, and thank you for your entire team for being here. 3 questions for you if we have time. First one is on minimum wage. Currently, Pennsylvanians are struggling, just like folks in the rest of the country, with increasing prices. Gas is going up. Costs at the grocery store are going up. Just costs to heat our homes are going up. Things keep going up. Wages are still stuck at $7.25 for minimum wage. Representative Ronnie Green has a bill that'll bring wages up to $15 immediately and then tie it to cost of living after. Can you talk about how a bill like this, which reflects the governor's budget priorities, would help to bring Pennsylvania forward and also help these workers who are struggling here in the Commonwealth?
Thanks so much, Representative. You know, I think it's both an issue of economy and equity. So from an economic standpoint, you know, people who are making minimum wage are working full time are making just a little over $15,000 a year. That puts them below the poverty line. From an economic standpoint, if we raised everybody to $15 an hour, once it's implemented, we'd end up saving up to $300 million, according to DHS, in supports that we've been giving families that aren't able to take care of themselves based on their pay. We'd also put $80 million into the General Revenue Fund through taxes. And it would also give people an opportunity to just pay, as you say, pay for the things that affect their lives. It would put more money into local economies, and it would make us more competitive when we look at other states, because every state around us has a higher minimum wage.
Thank you. Currently in Pennsylvania, we have a worker shortage in many industries, and our folks with disabilities many are very eager to work, but just needed job accommodations, need a little bit of assistance to be able to get these jobs. So can you talk about what your office has been doing to uplift folks with disabilities so they can enter the workforce?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. This past year alone, we've put more than 6,000 workers into jobs with 3,500 companies across Pennsylvania. We've had 19,000 new folks reach out to us this year. Thousands of people are served through the various programs through our vocational rehabilitation. Everyone from young people with pre-employment services, we do summer internship programs, we help young people who are transitioning to college with skills-ready opportunities at Penn State every year. We have a My Work program that's very popular that gives young people in high school the opportunity to work for the summer, their first paid work experience. And then we work with we try to make sure that we are training people to get into workforce pipelines. So whether that's trying to get people into apprenticeship programs or into skills training, or building up people in the workforce. And I also want to thank First Lady Shapiro, who's really helped us. This has really been a pet project of hers to work with OVR. And she's really opened up great opportunities for us with new employers across the Commonwealth to build new opportunities to get people into new jobs.
Thank you for your work to help these folks get into the workforce. And final question is about captive audience. I have a bill that would ban these captive audience arrangements where workers are forced to listen to political speech, including anti-union rhetoric. Can you tell us, if a bill like this would get passed, what role perhaps your agency might be in enforcing this and making sure that workers are not forced to hear political rhetoric or anti-union rhetoric while in the workforce?
Well, having been a union lawyer for many years, I can appreciate that that's an issue. Certainly, any way that the labor and industry can support a bill, by way of enforcement, we'd be certainly happy to discuss with you and make sure that it's aligning to the needs of the workforce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and welcome, Secretary Walker and team Labor and Industry. Welcome. We're glad to have you here. And Madam Secretary, it's good to see you again, too.
Good to see you.
According to data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, not a single utility-scale natural gas project has been started in Pennsylvania since Governor Wolf pushed the Commonwealth into the Regional Green Gas Initiative back in 2019. 22 states, including Ohio and West Virginia, had natural gas power plants of 75 megawatts or bigger, larger, pardon me, under construction in various stages as of spring of 25. Interestingly, there were 0 sites planned for any of the 11 states that had been participating in RGGI. There's a broad agreement across the Commonwealth that our economy depends on energy. My good friend, the gentleman from Philadelphia, just spoke about how energy affects all of our communities, from direct development of our state's abundant natural resources to affordable energy required to keep our manufacturing robust and competitive. It's undeniable that a strong economy depends on a strong energy sector. Amendments to the fiscal code officially ended Pennsylvania's participation in RGGI, and I consider that very good news. So I'll get to the question. What are the prospects for enhanced energy investment across Pennsylvania in the coming years, and how will these investments impact the workforce across the Commonwealth?
Thanks so much for the question, Representative Barton. As you know, one of the 5 sectors that the governor's...
Secretary, can I just ask you to get... Yeah, thank you.
Of course, apologies. As you know, one of the 5 sectors in the governor's 10-year economic development plan is, in fact, energy. So making sure that we are creating a robust workforce in the energy space is important to us. So as we roll out apprenticeship programs and issue grant awards in that space, as well as schools-to-work programs, to be able to continue to get people into that pipeline, into well-paying, family-sustaining jobs is important to the agency as well.
So and you referenced the governor's plan, the lightning plan, is that you're referring to, or?
The 10-year economic development plan has 5 key areas, one of which is energy.
Right, and I mean, Pennsylvania is the number, I sound like a broken record saying this, we're the #2 energy natural resource in the United States of America. And if we look at what we can do, and we heard, again, that my good friend, the gentleman from Philadelphia, talk about people struggling with high cost of energy, high electric bills. We should be the cheapest in the United States of America, candidly. And so there's so much economic development that could come from that. And I greatly appreciate anything you can do to continue that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Donahue. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, and your team for being here. Wanted to talk a little bit about unemployment compensation. I wanted to talk a little bit about the technology that you all have been developing to help make it a little more efficient. And so could you talk a little bit about the Service Infrastructure Improvement Fund and what it's actually doing? Is it successful? Is it working? What still needs to be done to improve it?
So thank you so much for that question. That is really important. So as you know, when we were here, this is now our 4th budget hearing. So 4 budget hearings ago, what was top of mind for everyone was unemployment compensation, how the system wasn't serving Pennsylvanians. So the governor invested heavily in, and we took advantage of the Service Infrastructure and Improvement Fund to do that, to add 380 intake interviewers, to have live people in, have UC Connect, which puts our intake interviewers into career links across the state. We have UC Chat, we have email services. So these have all reduced sort of the impact on all of your offices and have served people wherever they are. So if they want to be in person, they can be in person or they can be online. This past year, the federal government reduced our funding in UC by $7.7 million. So the SIF investment, $115.6 million this year is what we're asking for, will really make sure that we continue to serve the people of Pennsylvania in the same fashion we have over the last 3 years when federal funding is diminishing.
Got you. Just to stay on that topic of unemployment compensation, I know I asked about this last year, the referee appeals process. I know that when you mentioned what's going on, I think you all were looking, there's a backlog, right? There was a backlog in around the Philadelphia area and Pittsburgh, and you all were looking, I believe, to, at that time, bring on 6 new referees. And I believe that you had mentioned that the time frame that it took from start to finish for that appeals process was roughly around 60 days, but before you took over, it was like 210 days. So it seemed like we had made progress. Do you have a status update on the timeline that it takes? And did you hire those 6 referees? And what's the update on that status?
So I thank you very much for the question. So this time last year, we had about 19,000 backlog claims. Right now, we have about 7,000, which is considered a working, sort of a working average. We are now below the 45-day benchmark, which is terrific. And yes, we did. We hired folks. We were able to really have people work overtime and focus in the areas where we had the big backlogs to get rid of them. And we're also working on getting through regulatory changes in that space. So right now, we have no option for telephone or video hearings, which is something that's going to be, and the IRC is going to be hearing that on March 19th. And what it'll give us the ability to do is to have referees that are maybe less busy hear some of the online or telephonic hearings. And that would be a choice of both parties. But if parties choose to do that because it's too long to drive or it's inconvenient to get to a referee's office, it gives us the ability, again, to cut down on the number of backlog claims. So I think we're moving really in the right direction. And a real shout out to that team because they really put in a lot of hours and a lot of time to get us to where we are.
Yeah, definitely shout out to the team. I know we've seen in our office back in Pittsburgh, like the process being more efficient, so we're grateful for that. So from 60 days to 45 days, I believe the federal standard is 30?
I think it's 45.
Oh, it's 45?
And we're now within benchmark, yes.
Okay, well, anything that we can do to help continue to bring that down from 45 days, let us know. But thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Alsomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Walker and team, thank you for being here this morning. Madam Secretary, during last year's budget hearing, we had a significant discussion regarding the management of federal broadband funds. I am concerned because we all know that the deployment of broadband access is fundamental to jobs and economic development in rural areas across Pennsylvania, connecting our communities to global marketplace. Back on February 9th, 2026, the National Telecommunications Information Administration conditionally approved Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority's Broadband Equity Access and Deployment final proposal. This proposal is slated to provide over $711 million to expand broadband access to nearly 130 locations, unserved locations throughout the state, largely in rural areas like mine in Pike and Wayne counties. It's also my understanding that the it's also my understanding that the federal approval is only conditional because of the disagreement we explored last year regarding the classification of broadband line workers. Specifically, the Shapiro administration refused to recognize that fiber optic line installation is inherently different from electrical line work. As a result, concerns were raised that Commonwealth-related expenditures related to the project will far exceed what is reasonable and necessary, contrary to the regulations promulgated by the federal government. In other words, the Shapiro administration is not doing what it needs to control costs, enhance affordability, and ensure that these funds will provide every possible mile of fiber to connect the maximum number of rural locations. So, Madam Secretary, can you please tell us, will the Department of Labor and Industry comply with this conditional approval to ensure that our rural communities do not lose out on this $711 million? And I have a follow-up to that as well.
Okay, thanks so much for your question. As Secretary Siger testified last week, all 130,000 locations that are slated to be part of this rollout will happen. The unserved customers will become zero. It has nothing to do with the classification per se or the rate for those that have been bid out. With respect to NTIA's requirements, if any, they haven't told us what those were. Candidly, we're still waiting. But you can be rest assured that we will work with our colleagues to make all efforts to make sure that those funds are released.
Okay, thank you. Yes, last week, Secretary Siger did testify, and he stated that he believes the $711 million is enough to finish the identified 130,000 unserved locations associated with that funding. And I believe he did state that that would take care of all unserved locations throughout the Commonwealth. However, a quick review of the DCED website reveals there are 254,000 unserved and underserved locations in the Commonwealth. Therefore, there are still nearly 125,000 locations without a plan for broadband coverage. Getting a worker classification for wage rates correct would ensure these funds can expand broadband access as far as possible. So, Madam Secretary, why is your department continuing to fight against appropriate classification and wage rates in the Commonwealth Court?
A lot of questions there. So the DCED piece I will rely on my colleagues for. With respect to classification and wage rates, the particular case that's pending right now before the Commonwealth Court was just argued a few weeks ago, and we should be getting a decision from that en banc panel shortly. So I can't really comment on that beyond saying that we'll see what the court directs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary, thanks for being here and your whole team. It's a long week, and these days, you know, when you're in the spotlight, I know they're tough. And I don't want to overstep sort of the monologue part, but I'm pretty excited about a thing we have coming up, and I'm going to ask Director Hyde to give me some comments. In my district office, led by an intern, we are creating a resource fair March 28th. And currently, over 400 families have signed up. We have 75 vendors. OVR has a table. You'll be there. And we're expecting Boston University, Syracuse University, all focused on post-high school. You're 18 years old. You graduate from high school. How do you transition into a world? And I'm going to read a couple things so I get it right. But in a world where there's employment and opportunity for an individual who needs support. We have, like local folks, Integrate for Good, Ken Crest Variety Club, but also a couple of instances where a family has created their own coffee shop, right? So that Barista Jake can serve and create a future for himself in that regard. It's an exciting time. I know that it's not the whole story. I know that you want to talk about the whole story, so I'd like to sort of turn that over. And then maybe at the conclusion of that, the sensitive part, right? And I always say this, I'm smiling and everybody kind of understands where I'm going. If our federal colleagues aren't funding things the way they used to, how does that impact us? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll talk about the good stuff. Thank you for the question. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So the whole story is our publication of success stories, and this year we endeavored to do that for every county. We combined a couple of the small little counties, but for general purposes, we were able to find successes everywhere. We're very proud of our customers and everybody that we serve and our partners with employers and agencies like you mentioned, Ken Crest, we use them routinely. So we're just really excited to show the abilities of people with disabilities because they are just looking for opportunities, and OVR is usually the bridge that helps them, obtain those opportunities and work in the competitive labor market. And you mentioned the transition from high school to work or high school to school, and one of our big services that we're required to do and we love doing is serving students with disabilities through our pre-employment transition services. We are required to reserve 15% of our federal money on students with disabilities who are making that transition from high school to work or to school. So anyone starting at age 14 through graduation we can work with, and we really focus on self-advocacy skills, post-secondary exploration, and paid work-based learning, which is our big My Work program in the summers. So My Work is working with a vendor and an employer, usually a nonprofit or a municipality, township, borough, whatever, to get kids with disabilities their first work experience. And we pay for all that. We pay for the wages. We pay for the supports. But it's setting that expectation for students with disabilities to work in a competitive labor market. And we're super proud of that. We did about 400, 500 last year. We're probably going to do about 1,000 students this summer, and we're super excited. The funding has been a roller coaster at the federal level. Going back to 2024, the federal government flat funded us. We have a mandatory COLA in the Rehabilitation Act that increases slightly every year.
Could you make sure that mandatory COLA is in our Pennsylvania?
No, it's in the National Rehab Act. Yeah,
okay.
The Rehab Act is the Federal Rehab Act is what governs OVR's work for the most part, and there's a mandatory COLA in there, and they took it in 2024, and that was kind of unprecedented. Hadn't happened in recent memory, and then since then, it's been threatened to be taken, but it ends up coming back in the end through the Senate and the House. So it's been will they, won't they for us after that 2024. And we know that in 2026, that was just passed at the federal level. Originally, the president had taken the COLA out, but then the Senate and House put it back in at the kind of last minute. We don't know what federal fiscal year 27 will bring, but that will it, won't it has been a complication for us in determining what total services we can provide for the year. It also impacts our ability to hire, which prevents us from hiring more counselors to serve more people.
Right. And I'll just finish up by saying that level of consistency allows planning and even my resource fair, right? If we're not continuously funded in ways that make sense for all of those families, it's hard to plan and see the future. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes Representative Kutz.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Secretary. Thank you for everyone for being here with us to take the time today. I want to zero in on UC fraud, just if you have any notes you need to turn to on that while I get to my question here. Back in 2022, the IFO produced a performance-based budget report for your agency that indicated that in 2020 and 2021, $570 million was fraudulently paid in regular UC payments. Now, obviously, you were not Secretary of Labor and Industry at the time, and that kind of goes back to some broader issues where the Commonwealth paid out $6.6 billion and $2.3 billion in regular benefits in 2020 and 2021. And that obviously comes from business shutdowns and COVID and all that. So coming out of that now, just generally on fraud, do you have an estimate as to how much fraud may have occurred in the UC system in 2024 and 2025, and how much was recovered by your department?
So I'll have the Deputy Secretary sort of get into the details. What I can tell you is that we have implemented all the multi-factor authentication. We have ID.me kiosks at every one of our 58 CareerLink locations, and we have another 20 or so UPS locations in areas to make sure that people are identifying themselves. I think fraud is very low right now. Maybe a few false identity claims that we're able to handle very quickly, but I will ask the Deputy Secretary if she has any more granular detail.
So I think it's important to understand in the first instance that when a fraudulent overpayment is written, it's not recovered in that year. So I can tell you how many fraudulent overpayments were written in 2024. I can also tell you what the recoveries were, but it's not apples to apples. If I write a fraudulent overpayment today, and that individual never files for unemployment, absent the statutory remedies to go after that fraudulent payment, we may not see that money.
Sure. So let's start there then. Okay. Whatever dollar amounts you have, I think what I'm getting at is the core, the root of the issue, which is how much of an issue dollar-wise is UC fraud, and as a General Assembly, what can we do statutorily to help combat that fraud, and what does your department need to be able to get that dollar amount down?
So in 2024, the total number of fraudulent overpayments written across, do you want regular PEUC, do you want all of the programs?
Sure.
So across regular UC, PEUC, extended benefits, FPUC, and PUA was 43,586,000. In regular unemployment, it was 5.9 million. And then in 2025, across regular UC, PEUC, EB, FPUC, PUA, that was 33.84 million, with regular UC being 4.9 million.
So that sounds like a drastic change from 5 years ago.
Yes, it would be. And I would attribute that to identity verification on the front end, if you want to use the modernized system, multi-factor authentication, using AVS, account verification services through the Treasury, all of the required cross-matches that we have to have, and candidly having more staff and being able, thanks to the SIF fund, to supplement our federal funding and staff up. We also have a robust relationship with the United States Department of Labor, OIG's office. We refer any cases involving waste or fraud to them, and they have been wonderful in partnering with us to recover money.
So let me ask this, if I can put it in a dollar and cents way, how much does your department spend on fraud recovery compared to how much you're able to recover? Does that make sense?
I would have to see if we can get you an estimate on that. I can tell you what we pay in terms of, we can get you an estimate on what it costs for ID.me, which is our identity verification provider, but our cross matches are required as part of the system. So those federal cross matches like the Social Security Administration, the Integrity Data Hub, the NDNH and SDNH, we can try to put a price point on that.
Are there other statutory measures that your department is looking for that could help kind of continue to take that number down?
If I would continue to ask for anything, it would just be the SIF funding so that we can continue to keep the complement that we have and have staff who can investigate these claims. I will tell you that UC fraud during the pandemic and UC fraud in the traditional sense are really two different things. What we saw during the pandemic were foreign actors, bots filing claims. Typically, when you talk about UC fraud now, it is an individual who files a claim and goes back to work and doesn't tell us or doesn't report their earnings. And fraud is a term of art. You have to establish that frame of mind, that mens rea. So we should see less fraudulent overpayments, but there's a human element to this.
Excellent. And Deputy Secretary, I don't mean to cut you off. My time has expired. I just want to thank you for your efforts to continue to combat waste, fraud, and abuse in our public benefit systems. I want to thank the chairman for the time and look forward to a continued partnership with you.
Thank you.
Deputy Secretary, if you'd like some additional time to expand, you're welcome to.
Well, I do just think it's important to understand that what we saw during the pandemic was very unique and nuanced, and what you typically see when individuals have a fraudulent overpayment, it typically would be unreported earnings. Hopefully the days of that pandemic fraud, that identity theft fraud, are behind us.
Thank you very much. Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes Representative Bellman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for being here. We know that we have about 100,000 federal workers in Pennsylvania, and in 2025, the governor signed an executive order to hire federal furloughed workers. I just want to see how that initiative was going.
I'm happy to say we've hired several at our agency, and I know that that continues to be a priority of the administration. Thank you for asking.
No problem. Thank you. And is there anything that you think that we can do in order to continue that, in order to help more federal workers be hired with the state?
We have a lot of openings at the state, and we just continue to encourage anybody who's been displaced from a federal job to apply at the appropriate agency. We're always looking for good talent.
All right. Thank you. And another question, I have a lot of young people in my district that want to work. They can't wait till they graduate high school and become adults. So I just wanted to see, I know the governor is proposing to double the schools to work funding to $7 million. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that the program has had?
I would love to. Thanks for that question. We actually yesterday at Susquehanna Township School District announced announced 17 awardees, so $4.1 million we were able to put into schools to work for 17 awards across the Commonwealth. And these are wonderful opportunities to get young people into career pipelines, right? So often young people just don't know what career options might be out there. And Schools to Work gives them an opportunity of hands-on learning experience. They get Susquehanna has both industry-recognized credentials as well as college credits, so it's a dual enrollment. So it really prepares young people to see what a career might look like. Maybe their thing, maybe not. But if it is, they can either roll into a job immediately with the credentials they've earned, or they have, in this case, college credits that they can put into becoming a teacher if that's what they choose to do. So these are wonderful opportunities to really give young people the chance to try something and to get a head start on their next steps in their lives.
Do you think you have a number about like how many young people have gone through the program? Or?
I apologize. Yes, we've had thousands at this point of young people. We've been able to give 52 grantees. By doubling our money, we'll be able to do hopefully at least double the amount going forward. And right now, we've been able to have programs in just about 3/4 of the Commonwealth, the counties of the Commonwealth. So we'd love to expand that everywhere and to give as many young people opportunities as we possibly can.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary, it's great to have you here and see your staff. I know we do a lot of work together. I want to start my questions following up in the area of fraud. You know, I mean, we had massive fraud during COVID, and I know we're trying to take steps to recoup those funds. The Department of Government Efficiency, you know, DOGE, from a DC perspective, they identified nationally that there were thousands of workers that had extreme birth dates. You know, I think there were 24,000 people over 115. There were 28,000 people under 5 years old. The 10,000 people not even born yet. Most of that fraud seemed to be in California, New York, and Massachusetts. What has Pennsylvania done to kind of scrub our UC rolls or to ensure that we don't have these extreme birth date recipients?
Yeah, I think you heard Deputy Secretary Mackes talk about the various levels at which we identity check and that we, you know, employ the very best of systems to make sure that we are catching fraud on the front end and also comparing data to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we're really doing, and as she says, we're doing what the statutes and the law requires as well as what technology provides. We just need to continue to have the staff to keep doing that good work.
Sure. And in that area of fraud, a theme across the number of secretaries that have been here, illegal workers, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, just the drug, everything interconnected. When I listen and talk with the Pennsylvania's building trades, they feel, contractors are really profiting, and it's almost a 30% advantage when a contractor that's using illegal workers or undocumented workers, and it's not so much the political battle over the workers, but I'm interested in being able to get up the food chain. They're saying between $50 and $100 million of revenue lost through this tax fraud. Are there ways that we might be able to better pursue these contractors? How do we get you those tools so that we can work across agencies and hold people more accountable?
That's a great question. And the 30% you note is really the cost of an employee, right? So regardless of the status of the worker, if they're not having payroll taxes run, that's basically a 30% savings for whether it's a contractor on a construction site or any business owner that's not paying those taxes. That gives a real leg up to law violators, and it really makes for an unfair playing field for law-abiding contractors and businesses. We have seen our UC tax service, just through their auditing system, identified about 21,000 misclassified workers. Of that, about 2,300 were turned over to our Bureau of Labor Law Compliance for further sanctions to the contractors for us, our enforcement, our statutory enforcement is with respect to the Construction Workplace Misclassification Act. So only the construction workers were the ones that we were able to go further impose further fines on. So having plenty of resources in that space to be able to continue to do the work of getting on sites, looking at documents, doing head counts, looking at payroll records, those are really important aspects of keeping that fraud down.
One of those areas, somewhat shifting gears, but it's in an area of concern in the UEGF, the Uninsured Workers Guaranteed Fund, where right now, a couple of years ago, we increased, I think, by about 150% the surcharge on legitimate employers and contractors to pay for undocumented or under-the-table workers. We still, to my understanding, do not require proof of wages, right, or anything to be able to identify the employer. A person can just call up and say, I was working and I was making this much money, and then they start to receive those benefits. It would be really, is there a way that we can, put some checks and balances in to, better hold the contractors accountable that are paying people under the table?
I think I'll ask Deputy Secretary Mullery to address that, Representative, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Rep. Nelson, for the question. I was here when that legislation was considered. I can tell you that the workers' compensation judges and the commissioners on the Workers' Compensation Appeal Board follow the law and the statute to the T. So they are reviewing whatever evidence is presented to them with regard to wages, making a determination as to what the average weekly wage and compensation rate are, and issuing orders as appropriate.
It's just the law doesn't require proof, right? A verbal, somebody could just say what they make and they advance, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have the ability to submit bank deposits or any type of memorandum that they may have from the employer evidencing their wages. But certainly our workers' compensation judges and our commissioners on the appeal board have the authority to assess weight and credibility to witness testimony. That's part of the process as it stands today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Young.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
In the child labor space, the fines collected from violators varies from 2020 to current. Is there an explanation why? I'm trying to see if there is a correlation between the reporting and the investigations, or is there some other reason why it varies in the numbers from the collections of the fines?
You're just why the numbers are what they are?
Say it again.
You're asking what the trend is in the numbers?
Right. Is there a reason why it either goes up or down? So if you look at your graph, so in 2020 it's different from from 2020 until current. So it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and goes down. But I'm not it doesn't share with me the reasons why in terms of the fines collected.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is a specific time. I'm going to ask the Deputy Secretary to address that.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you for the question. In general, if you want to start in 2020, we're just seeing a steady increase in the number of complaints that are filed and also the number of investigations that are conducted. So I think at the heart, that would explain why the numbers change from year to year. As far as why they're trending up, I mean, then ultimately, the number of violations are what they are. So, in some instances they may be lower, some instances they may be higher, but whatever violations we find, that would be reflective in the violations that are, or the fines that are ultimately assessed.
All right, and my apologies because I meant to really emphasize the child labor space. So is that the answer for the child labor space?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, so I'm just looking at some data in front of me. Back in 2020, investigations resulting in fines were 71, and in fiscal year 24-25, there were 165. So that's a big, just 5 years, a big difference in the violation or the investigations resulting in violations.
And I think generally looking at that, I think as the labor market got tighter, I think there were more children that were working and being utilized to fill open positions. I think that's probably why we saw an uptick over the last couple of years.
Okay. Now, I know I have legislation that's currently in the Senate that increases the fines for Child Labor Act violators. And so would you say that increasing the fines for those bad actors will cause employers to hire less children?
I think generally when you increase the fines, it causes more compliance, yes.
Okay, compliance, okay. And also, how would you say that increasing the fines of the violators, do you think it will impact our school to work and apprenticeship initiatives?
The more money in the general fund, potentially that could be put back into our program, certainly. And most of our fines go, if we're not getting wages back to workers, we are adding money to the general fund. So increasing the general fund increases the opportunity to spend that money elsewhere.
But you have not heard of a report of any employer saying because they're now being held accountable, they will hire less youth to be employed by their establishment.
We often resolve cases with employers with the understanding that they will not continue to do that and with the understanding that we will continue to monitor that they do not.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative DeVanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harris, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. Always good to see you. Madam Secretary, the governor proposes an additional $1 million for the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, or OVR, to assist Pennsylvanians who are blind, deaf, or hard of hearing to secure and maintain employment. Can you talk about this initiative and how it will help those individuals secure and maintain employment?
That's a great question. Thanks so much. And we're looking to take that $1 million and put it into two different pots. So one is for support service providers, and those are the folks that work with individuals that are deaf and blind. So it's a really niche area. We have about 112 people who are being serviced by that now, and then our Office of Deaf and our Office of Blind and Visually Impaired to do things like training people to use white canes to help them find their way around their homes and to identify, to be able to label things in their homes. So it's these are two areas that are not funded by VR funds, our vocational rehabilitation funds. So it really is supports that's really necessary for some of our most vulnerable citizens.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. Now, would you say that when an individual gets a job, are they more short-term, or are they long-term jobs, or are they just in the middle whenever someone does find employment?
So our intention, we want to get people into competitive integrative employment for their work life. So we are looking to get people into training programs, give them the supports they need to be able to find a job and keep a job and be able to support their families.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Harris.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me for multitasking at the moment. I wanted to ask about the Centers for Independent Living. We are very proud of ours back in Lackawanna County, where Representative Donahue and Kozarowski, both on this committee, are also proud of that center as well. I know last year the funding for those Centers for Independent Living ended up being level funded, and the proposal in this budget remains as much. Just wondered if you could talk about the needs for that program, and if we really should be taking a look in this branch of government before sending a budget over to you about increasing that program, just to recognize and support the amazing work they do for so many individuals across the state.
And they do such amazing work. Thank you so much for the question. These are, groups that support individuals with disabilities to stay in their homes. It's much more costly to be outside your home, and it's really separating people from their communities. So being able to stay in your homes and have those supports are so important. It is a flat funding request of $2.64 million. We divide that among the 9 SILs in the state. 2 are federal and state funded, and 7 are just state funded. They are really good with the resources they have. I'm sure they'd welcome additional resources, but these are, again, great ways to keep people living independently in their home, and it's just a real community asset.
I appreciate it. Well, I thank you for the feedback, and we'll do our best to see what we can do as far as supporting that line now and in years to come.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Secretary.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Flood.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. And I just want to add to the previous question about the SILs. They're really great. They really do offer a great opportunity for those individuals living with disabilities. I think that the SILs offer a valuable asset to our community and those involved in it. My question for you is, I understand that there's a waiting list for services provided by the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation for customers with disabilities in the categories of significantly disabled or non-significant disabilities with an individual plan for employment developed prior to April 1st, 2025. And that will remain in place as a result of the flat federal funding. This is referred to as the order of selection. Can you please provide the committee with an update on the order of selection and when we will see additional individuals removed from that list?
Thank you so much, Representative. It's such an important question. As you note, we have 3 categories. Our most significantly disabled, there is no wait list. We continue to service those folks. Our significantly disabled and disabled are on a wait list, 1,319 on the former and 163 on the latter. That's a total of just over 1,400 people. As Deputy Secretary Hyde said earlier, because of flat funding in 2024, it really pushed us sort of in this direction, and in the fall we had to start implementing this order of selection. If federal funding is not stalled at a 2024 level, if we continue to get cost of living adjustments, if we continue to get reauthorized funds, we may be able to take ourselves off of the order of selection, but right now, because we did, albeit 7 months late, get a cost of living in this last budget, we've been able to start to slowly staff up because we're on a hiring freeze as well, and we're starting to take people off that order of selection at somewhere between 100 and 200 each month. So we're keeping an eye on it to make sure that we are moving people off as quickly as we can based on the resources we have.
Can you provide us with a number of how many people are still on that list?
Yeah, the total right now on that list is 1,404 people.
1,400.
1,319 on significantly disabled and 163 on disabled.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. I appreciate that information.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Kozarowski.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for being here with us this morning. Couple things. One, I do have quite a few people in my district back in Scranton, Pennsylvania, that work with in SWIFT. And I will say, I do engage with some of the stakeholders, the healthcare world, the trial bar, the insurance. And I wanted you to know that there is a definite change in culture. It's better. The rapport. So I wanted to say thank you for that. It's under your leadership and your administration, I have seen a change. I have family members that work at SWIFT and lots of friends that do, and so I heard lots of complaints over the last 20 years. But I wanted to let you know that there is a change, and it's been beneficial for just the overall camaraderie and the feeling of being able to go to work and feeling like they're being productive. So that's been a good change.
Well,
So
I
thank you.
appreciate that, and Deputy Secretary Mullery has done an excellent job in workers' comp across the state, and just making sure that's the feeling shared everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Mullery. He used to sit right in this chair behind me, and and Kyle Mullins, myself, Kyle Donahue, also from the Scranton area. I don't think you had a chance to serve with Mullery, but I do miss some of his comments that he would make during his wisdom. Excuse me, Mullins is saying his wisdom on the House floor. So yeah, we are grateful for that. But as we look, forward to strengthen the long-term financial position of SWIFT and keep premiums affordable for the employers, can you speak to how SWIFT's current statutory cap on equity investments affects its overall investment return? And if that cap were to be modernized or lifted, what kind of additional revenue potential or financial flexibility might that create for the fund and the workers and businesses it serves?
That is a great question. So right now, we have a 7.5% cap in equity investment. If we were to take that up to 20%, for example, given sort of market conditions, we could add as much as like $17.3 million in 1 year. It would really, everybody's, investing more evenly than SWIFT is, and it would certainly give us an opportunity to add to the corpus of the fund.
Yeah, that's a big number.
It's a big number.
So thank you for that, and I think it would be better to be able to do something in that terms for the long-term financial stability, so thank you.
We agree, and we'd be happy to help with any kind of drafting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Krupa.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I want to talk a little bit about the $3.5 million within the Schools to Work appropriation. First, I want to give a shout out, though, to the CTI, Fayette County CTI in my district, and in the neighboring district, the Greene County CTC, which I'm also very familiar with. And I think they're doing really great things already in noting where the workforce shortages are and taking steps to implement that. At the Fayette County CTC, they have expanded. They built a brand new medical science building. They recently expanded for an early education, two areas where we know there is definitely a need for workforce. I know in Greene County, one of their focuses have been a new CDL driving program. But Madam Secretary, our CTCs and CTIs are already operating co-op programs, employer partnerships, and apprentice pipelines. What specifically does this $3.5 million, this additional money, what is it going to do that our CTCs are not already doing? And I'm going to hammer some questions out real quick, and then you can address them as you feel relevant. But can you provide a breakdown of where this funding is going to go? How much is directed to student wages? How much to employer reimbursement? And how much to administration or intermediaries? Does this funding go directly to the CTCs and the school districts, or is it going to be routed through workforce boards and nonprofit or nonprofit coordinators? Given Pennsylvania's workforce shortages in healthcare, skilled trades, manufacturing, and transportation, how are we going to ensure that this initiative is specifically targeting those fields so that we see measured outcomes? What can we expect to see with this program?
So thank you for all those questions.
Thank you.
So our Schools to Work program, as I said, $3.5 million is where we have been. If we can double that amount to a $7 million investment, we can double the outcome. So we have 17 programs this year that we were able to put money into, seed money, to be able to roll out the programs. I was talking about the Susquehanna Township School District program yesterday that was preparing young people to become teachers or paraprofessionals if they chose that line of work. So focusing on the areas what the governor has identified in his economic development plan, as well as healthcare and education and building and construction trades. We really try to be aligned with the workforce needs in the areas, and we look at the projected impact of each of the programs as we consider them. There were many, many more programs than we were able to grant funding to this year, and we just want to increase the reach of that.
So I want to get into the weeds a little bit, because that on its surface sounds great, but I think we owe it to the taxpayers of Pennsylvania to make sure that these programs aren't just being used for political goodwill. So specifically, Where is the money from these allocations? Is it going to the school districts? Is it going to the employers? Is it going for administration costs? How is this money specifically being driven out?
I'm going to ask the Deputy Secretary to get into the administrative weeds a bit on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. So these grants are administered through a competitive grant process.
Political goodwill.
I'm sorry?
Political goodwill is what often we see happening with respect to that, but thank you.
Okay. So the eligible applicants are partnerships between schools, businesses, and organizations. That could be a workforce board, that could be another community organization that offers workforce training. There is administrative caps on all of these grants, and the funding goes out to support the direct training of the young people, and other activities that are hands-on training.
So I appreciate that, but what I am hearing is that the money is going to some intermediary to decide how it's going to be divvied out. Who ultimately is that money going to? Is it going to the school districts to develop curriculum? Is it going to the student for wages? Is it going to the employer? Are those local questions then that those local partnerships are deciding?
It depends on each of each of the grants look differently depending upon the community, the needs, and the industries that they're focused on.
And what are we doing to ensure that there's no insider dealing or conflicts of interest that's making sure, what are we doing to protect this money to make sure it's going for the intended purpose and not just going to line somebody's pockets?
We have really strong processes related to the procurement of the grants as well as the management of the grants. There are monthly and quarterly reportings that we are reviewing.
So my yellow light came on, so just really quickly, and I apologize, I'd love to follow up with this. Are CTCs able to directly apply for this funding themselves independently?
They'd have to be with a partnership of other organizations.
Okay. Is this program the additional funds? One of the things that was also noted in the budget address was that there was a decrease in, I believe, $2.5 million in apprenticeship training. Is this just shifting those funds to this other program?
So I can speak to that. We've asked for $10 million every time I've sat here, and you all have added that extra $2.5 million. So we are looking for the same ask we've made. Happy to take the additional resources if you'd like to give them to us. Thank you.
I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We talked a lot about apprenticeships, but I actually want to talk about mentoring because it's proven to be an effective strategy for businesses to support new and existing employees and actually assist with engagement and retention. So as we're talking about, workforce development and ensuring that folks are able to get employment and keep employees, how is mentoring represented in the workforce development and the labor and industry budget in order to help young adults and even returning citizens throughout the Commonwealth feel supported and satisfied in their workplace?
That's a great question, and mentoring is so important. I'd love to talk with you about ways to sort of expand that as a component, a key component of workforce development, particularly in the reentry space. I'll speak to that for a moment. We received an almost $10 million grant, a $9.5 million grant a couple of years ago from the USDOL to start a program, a reentry program for folks that are in federal prisons across Pennsylvania. And part of, sort of as an expansion of that, we were able to get another $1.5 million that was specifically for mentoring. So the first part of the program is to identify while people are still incarcerated, sort of identify skill sets, come up with training plans. Second is to sort of transition them into the middle place and get the skills training they need. And finally, to help people with treatment support, housing, other supports to get them into jobs and find fair opportunity employers. But this mentoring piece is so critical because it actually puts a mentor with every person who's coming out so that they have someone to talk to, work with, whether it's just for housing supports, whether it's to continue with workplace skill development, whatever it may be. But to your point, people who have those kinds of supports, it reduces recidivism. It makes people more successful when they have someone to talk to and look up to and get pointers from. So it's just a wonderful component of the workforce system.
Thank you. I would love to talk to you more about how we can include that to, one, help people with recidivism, and also to ensure that younger folks are not in the system in the first place because they have those supports.
That would be great. Thank you.
What protections for workers at all stages of the citizenship process are you guys contemplating, or do you have in place when it comes to this increased federal enforcement on immigration? We're seeing a lot of people who are lawfully in the United States being detained. And I'm wondering if you guys are working to educate employers or to otherwise assist those workers who are a little bit afraid right now of actually going to work and being picked up.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we don't have any enforcement authority with regard to immigration. So we enforce our laws irrespective of anybody's status, and that's what we're charged to do. What I can tell you, though, is that when workers, whether they have appropriate work papers or they don't, whether they're citizens or they're not, when people are afraid to go to work because of the color of their skin or just afraid to go to work, it hurts us in enforcing our laws, right? Because when people are afraid to talk to government, they sort of lump us all together, and they don't know that labor law investigators from Pennsylvania are not concerned about their immigration status and just want to make sure that children aren't being abused on a work site. So we always try to educate workers whenever we have the opportunity, and employers about what we enforce and the ways that they can be compliant with law.
Thank you. And then I want to ask about paid family leave. Obviously, we have not accomplished getting that across the finish line here. It's been a consistent push from the governor and this administration, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the benefits of paid family leave and how this administration would envision enacting that.
So I think we'd be very happy to talk with you about any legislative strategies that we could get through. But anytime that we can support families, we are supporting the workforce, right? So whether that's anything from giving people paid family leave to childcare, right? So when we make it possible for people to go to work and to take care of their families, it's a win for Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And it increases the retention as well of employees. Is that right?
It certainly does.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlelady. Representative Mako.
Thank you, Mr.
Who's
Chairman.
not wearing a turtleneck.
I know, I dropped the ball next
Inside
Tuesday. I'm on it. I don't actually own a turtleneck, so like.
Blasphemy. That is blasphemy, sir.
I know.
Point of order.
Have that stricken from the record.
I got braces on though.
Oh, you got your braces on. All right. Fair enough.
On topic, Madam Secretary. Not men's fashion, but I had a question about the Worker Administration Compensation Fund. From my understanding, there's a $5.5 million increase this year, and it was outlined as security upgrades and functional improvements within the platforms for external users within the insurance industry. And I just was hoping you could speak to why these improvements, how they'll help people in the insurance industry, and what was identified to increase the spending and get these security protocols in place.
Yeah, I think it's all good news. So I'm going to let Deputy Secretary Mallory talk a bit more about the rollout of the
Welcome back to the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Pretty much every enhancement right now being considered or implemented within WICAS is being driven by stakeholder engagement. Okay. So we routinely meet with the insurance industry. We have a monthly call with them that is heavily attended, usually between 75 and 100 representatives from insurance. We have regular meetings with trial bar, both claimant and defense. We have quarterly meetings with the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council, and it is through that communication and consistent meeting that we are presented with I don't want to call them issues, but essentially ways that we can make the system that we have run better. So anything that is contained in these current enhancements is being driven by stakeholders. It's coming from stakeholder request. On the other end is our security measure. So we're doing some multi-factor authentication. We're doing some ID.me, just things to ensure that we don't experience any type of fraud or any type of breach of our current system, because it's a system that really works well and has worked well consistently since it was established.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I'm going with this question is what security protocols are you putting in place? Is there something that we should be doing or looking at more from the General Assembly's point of view that would help in securing these, I guess?
Yeah, I never want to turn down assistance, but the Bureau of Workers' Compensation is funded through assessments on insurance carriers and self-insured employers. And I can tell you that we don't receive complaints from those entities with regard to the assessments that they are required to pay because the system works so well and they know that they can rely upon it. So while we appreciate your offer, if we need it, we will certainly ask. But at this point in time, I'm not here with an ask.
Well, we're from the government and we're here to help. So thank you very much, Madam Secretary. And Mr. Chairman, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Donahue.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Secretary Walker, you have highlighted in the past that worker misclassification has been a problem in Pennsylvania. Misclassification strips workers of protections and benefits like workers' compensation and employment, creates unfair competition, and reduces public tax revenue. I'm the prime sponsor of HB 721, which strengthens the Construction Workplace Misclassification Act and includes several unanimous recommendations made by the Joint Task Force on Misclassification of Employees. HB 721 passed out of the House with bipartisan support last May, but is still yet to be considered by the Senate. Could you just share with us any misclassification statistics you might have from over the last year or so to hopefully move this process along? And
Of course, and thank you. As you know, Attorney General Shapiro was on the Construction Misclassification Task Force, and I was his delegate on that. So we appreciate the movement in the House to adopt many of those recommendations. You know, it continues to be a problem. You've heard some of the statistics here today. For us, you know, our unemployment tax folks in routine audits came up with almost 22,000 misclassified workers. We've had 2,800 identified through the Bureau of Labor Law Compliance. It's a huge problem because when people misclassify their workers, which means they're not paying the taxes, they're saving hugely in a competitive market. They are in fact, as Representative Nelson said, they're getting a 30% discount on their bids. So it's a huge problem. And the way to fix big problems is to, I think, really be able to enforce a strong law. And so we encourage you to chat with your colleagues on the other side to get that through.
thank you, and I'm looking forward to working with you on that.
You as well, thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. Representative Reichert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Secretary. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the governor's minimum wage proposal. I know it's been touched on a little bit here, but it's obviously a pretty critical component of his budget proposals. Just to get an idea of the scope of workers who would be impacted by an increase to $15 minimum wage, how many workers in Pennsylvania would that impact?
Yeah, so according to our minimum wage report, we're looking at 553,800 workers who are making between minimum wage and $15 an hour.
Okay, is that more or less than last year?
I don't remember exactly the numbers from last year.
If you don't remember if it was higher or lower?
I don't know.
You don't remember? Okay.
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
It would have been 700 and some odd thousand last year, maybe. That could very well be. The trend is that it is going down, right? It seems like there are more and more workers who are making above the impacted wage. Would that be a correct assumption?
If the numbers have decreased to 200,000, but there's still 500,000 workers that are affected. Yeah.
What are those? Are those workers like high school students? How would you classify some of those workers?
You know, I actually wondered the same thing. As it turns out, almost 87% of people who are making minimum wage are 20 and older. So it's not just high school students that are working part-time. It's 20-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds that are making minimum wage as well.
Would it be roughly, say, just looking at the report here, over half are under the age of 24?
I don't know. I don't know to that degree.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Just looking at it conversely, they're typically more on the younger side, and then as people go up through the demographic change, the percentage drops off. Would that be a correct assumption? Just reading through
that may be, but anybody who's making minimum wage is making minimum wage. Right?
Sure.
So whether you're a young family or whether you're a young person who's trying to contribute to the family electric bill, it's still $7.25 an hour.
Sure, but I mean, obviously, I guess as you get older and you gain more experience and your employment ability goes up, then the wages tend to increase with that.
We would hope.
Typically.
I don't know that that's the case for every family, but certainly I think
Okay.
that would be what we'd hope.
Good. Well, and then just again taking a look at minimum wage policy, generally speaking, the House passed a bill. I think it was 1549 earlier this, well, I guess 2025, that phased in the minimum wage by county. Is that the position that the administration and LNI support, phasing in the minimum wage based off of county classification? Or are you looking for an overall, just all of a sudden we're hitting $15 across the Commonwealth?
The governor's calling for an immediate increase to minimum wage, as you know, to $15 an hour.
Okay.
Certainly, movement in any direction is movement in a direction, but he would like to have the $15 an hour in place immediately.
Okay, good. Thank you, Secretary. I really appreciate the clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. Thanks for being here today with us this morning. There were some specific questions asked about the increase. We have a $3.5 million increase in schools to work that's being proposed. I'm seeing our education institutions looking more towards experiential learning. Mentorships are all so important. Can you just tell us about some of the impacts that this program has already had, and maybe some of the pathways that it's already funded?
Yeah, that's great. So really, so many different pathways across the state. As I said, we have 17 awardees that we just announced yesterday. So everything from education to folks that are working in skilled trades, manufacturing. There's an endless opportunity for young people. And these are programs that give them the opportunity to go out and see what a job looks like, get skills, get certifications, and perhaps even are able to be dual enrolled. So it really can touch any area, any subject matter that's an in-demand job in any part of the state.
All right. And as a former workers' comp attorney, I know there's benefits are always an issue. One of the things that I've been looking at this year is the death benefit, House Bill 2049. There's bipartisan support for that. The average funeral costs in Pennsylvania are upwards of $20,000. The current benefit rate is $7,000. Thankfully, we are seeing over the last several years declining rates of folks passing away in the workplace, or at least claims being made. I'm wondering, is there any interest? Some of these folks, the only recovery they have is workers' comp. They're tragically killed. Their families are left trying to pick up the pieces afterwards and then deal with the burial. They have no other recourse. So, is there any interest in having that death benefit sort of get a little closer to what the market in Pennsylvania is doing? And do we have any idea, given the declining death rates, if that would have a nominal impact, significant impact, or any impact on insurance premiums in Pennsylvania?
I don't know what impact it would have, but we're certainly happy to talk with you about giving benefits to working families that have been affected by an injury or death in the workplace, for sure.
That's fine. And regarding another bill that's currently proposed, Chair Dawkins, House Bill 183, full body scarring, has there been, one of the things I often hear is administrability. Has there been any thoughts on how the department might implement that if the bill does get through the Senate?
I'm going to pass it over to Deputy Secretary Mueller, if I can.
Thank you, Representative Brennan. I can tell you that, yeah, we have discussed it. Spoke with Holly Sanangelo, who is the director of the Workers' Compensation Office of Adjudication, Al Frioni, the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Appeal Board, and the thought is that it would be administered through the existing system that we currently have. So these injured workers would present to a workers' compensation judge. They'd have to either display physically in person or via photograph the disfigurement. From that point, the workers' compensation judge would determine whether it was serious and permanent, whether or not it was work-related, and issue an order. Certainly, the judges and the members of the appeal board understand the vulnerability here, the potential for embarrassment. I can assure you, and you know as a practicing workers' compensation attorney, that our judges and our commissioners are extremely professional, and they will do everything in their power to reduce the potential of an injured worker to have to relive a traumatic event like that, and handle those cases with the utmost discreetness.
Okay. And under the current bill, serious and permanent is still a requirement, so there's no concern that this is going to be every type of injury. It's going to be serious and permanent still?
Yes, and it's going to, I mean, we're going to see an increase in the number of claims, an increase in the number of in-person hearing requests, so that the injured workers could show that disfigurement to the judge or the commissioner. We're prepared for that.
Okay. And thanks for your time this morning.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Marcel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much to all of you for being here this morning. I wanted to talk about the unemployment compensation call centers. I wanted to compliment you guys. I'm sure you don't get that very often, but every year I call in to see how long it takes, and every single year it goes down. And so just wanted to compliment you on the fact that you've been making progress in that area, because I would say that also trickles down to my district office, because we've also seen those numbers go down in terms of the number of people who need help because they can't figure out what to do. So I just wanted to compliment you also on making it more user-friendly, and because obviously when our constituents can't navigate government, they get frustrated. So I just wanted to thank you and start on that positive note.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the continued support, financial
thank
support.
you. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Service and Infrastructure Improvement Fund. And so the governor obviously recognized the importance of the call centers and making sure that this is something that's helpful for our constituents. And so he's proposing another Service and Infrastructure Improvement Fund authorization of $115.6 million for fiscal year 26-27. And according to your budget materials, there are about 1,638 full-time staff across all unemployment compensation bureaus and offices at the end of 2025, which is 51 positions less than at the end of 2024. Right. Your budget for 26-27 proposes 1,682 positions, which is very close to the amount at the end of 2024. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about really what do you think is the optimal number of positions in that area, kind of trying to forecast out, and then also trying to make sure that you're continuing to improve in the level of service for our constituents across the Commonwealth.
So thank you very much for that question. As you know, that first year we were looking to find sort of what that sweet spot was, to get enough staff to be really working with the people of Pennsylvania and taking the work from your offices, but not to be overstaffed. And we decided that was 380 additional intake interviewers. So that additional complement was added to our staff. But as time has gone on, we're not at pandemic levels or super high unemployment levels right now, thank God. So we have, and there's attrition, right? So we are trying to be thoughtful about how we staff up so that we have, sort of enough, but not too many people. We're having a spring and fall training class in 5 of our 6 UC service centers. We're going to be adding another 120 people. If for some reason unemployment ticks up, we will add to that complement. If unemployment stays the same or ticks down, then we'll let positions attrit and fill them when we need to. But we're trying to be really contemplating, and it does take time to train people, obviously, but trying to be really thoughtful and intentional about how many people we have on staff so that we're maximizing customer service, but not overstaffing at the same time.
That's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your response and the work you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Mays.
Happy Women's History Month.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Secretary Walker. Great to have you back.
Great to be here.
I have questions, of course, about women workers in our Commonwealth and just some national trends that we are seeing. My first question is actually to talk to you about the Pennsylvania Crown Act, which is now the law in our Commonwealth to end race-based hair discrimination. And so much of that type of discrimination happens in the workplace. It has impacted Black Pennsylvanians for generations, and particularly Black women workers. So now that we have passed this landmark legislation, and shout out to our Speaker, McClinton, who was co-prime sponsor on this bill, when there is landmark civil rights legislation that has to do with employment, what kind of approach or strategy does your department take to educate not only workers and employees about these expanded workplace protections?
So because this isn't in our space from an enforcement standpoint, we're not out training investigators for enforcement purposes, but we certainly, when people seek resources from us, we make sure we connect them with those resources. So we make sure that we provide a resource for the education for people who need to have more information.
So in enforcement, we know that the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission is the first point of contact for someone who has experienced this type of discrimination. How would or do you work with the commission around enforcement of workplace discrimination?
So we actually don't play a role in enforcement, but again, we certainly are able to connect people to resources when they have a concern, a concern about discrimination in the workplace.
Thank you, Secretary. And my next question is about the exodus of women from the workplace, from employment. We are seeing staggering numbers of women who have left the job market, and largely they are citing childcare, caregiving responsibilities, and layoffs. And specifically for Black women who have had to exit the job market, we're talking about 300,000 of Black women across this nation. They are also experiencing those challenges in addition to the changes in DEI efforts, as well as just a shrinking market for them. So my question to you is, are we seeing these kinds of trends here in Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth? And what are your thoughts or what are your strategies around how do we support women workers? How do we attract them back to employment and the job market?
That's a great question, and that is something that we've been giving a good deal of thought to. So, particularly women are impacted by a lack of childcare across the state, as well as care for their aging parents, right? And women are often put in the caretaker role for both sort of those ends of their family concerns. For us, we want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to support robust childcare programs across the state, to make sure that we are getting people into workforce programs, not just jobs of the moment, but really into career pathways with family-sustaining wages and benefits. So we are targeting grant opportunities to create like apprenticeship programs in that space. We're supporting, there recently was a registered apprenticeship program that was registered out of the Johnstown area that was supporting women becoming childcare workers and certified pre-K teachers in rural communities. We want to make sure that we are giving people the resources so that they can enter the workplace, because we certainly need the workers in the workplace.
Thank you for that. And childcare obviously is essential for an economy to thrive, especially here in our Commonwealth. And just to note that at the beginning of 2025, Black women had an unemployment rate of 5.4%. And at the end of 2025, it had risen dramatically to 7.3%. I know you may not have the statistics now, but I'd love to get where women, what the unemployment rate for women and Black women and women of color is in our Commonwealth, and maybe that can inform and guide your work around the workforce development, apprenticeship programs that we clearly need for women to understand in this Commonwealth that they are welcome in the workplace. It sounds like inflexibility in the workplace has also become an issue, and my colleagues and I, we have introduced a variety of bills that are meant to make working moms, especially moms of young children, to be able to get in and stay in the workforce and not feel like they've been pushed out. So thank you, Secretary. I look forward to working with you on all of that and more. I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you, and we'll get you those statistics. Representative, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. I wish we had more time to discuss this particular topic, because it could probably dictate an entire hearing, probably longer. But the advent of artificial intelligence and how it impacts the labor market, I'm curious, we hear reports from very smart people that know this subject a heck of a lot better than I do, that it's going to dramatically impact the labor market soon. Within the next 6 months to a year, we're going to see dramatic changes in certain types of jobs and maybe even mass unemployment in certain areas. And I was curious, what's your perspective at the Department of Labor, and how do you see artificial intelligence impacting the labor markets in the Commonwealth?
Well, you could certainly spend a whole hearing on these issues, and people are. Certainly, there's going to be some job elimination, there's going to be job creation, and there's going to be job transformation, right? So at the Department of Labor and Industry, we're working with other colleague agencies. We are in the process of trying to commission like a really robust study to be able to see really where we can make sure that we are helping people transition out of jobs that may be eliminated because of AI, but also making sure that they're trained and ready to pivot as jobs transform because of AI. So we're really at the, sort of still in the thinking phases of how to really have a statewide impact from a workforce perspective, but we are looking forward to continuing to engage in the subject.
Yeah, and when I was growing up, Western Pennsylvania, my grandfather from Aliquippa, he saw the mill shut down, and he used to drill in us, you got to get a college education. You got to get a college education. If you're going to be a productive member of society, you need to have a college education. And today, it seems like things have changed quite dramatically. I'm a father. There are many children within my district as well. Jobs for them. What should we be doing as a legislator? What should we be doing as a state government to encourage jobs? What type of jobs, I guess, should we be directing our kids to go to?
Boy, well, certainly jobs that don't require a college degree are in full demand across the Commonwealth. So jobs in the building and construction trades and manufacturing and some of these other key areas that the governor's identified in his economic development plan. I think you identify sort of that recent college graduate age is probably the most vulnerable to AI because they're just sort of learning as they come out of school, and that's an area that we really, need to focus on and find ways to make sure that we're upskilling and transitioning people into jobs. But I think these are all questions that we just have to keep looking at together and ask folks to do some studies to figure out if we can project where some of these jobs will go.
How soon do you think we'll be feeling, I know we're feeling it now, impact artificial intelligence in different places, but as far as seeing real changes within the job market, do you think it's going to be within the next year, couple years?
I think we're seeing it now, and I think we're going to continue to see it. I don't know when the biggest impact will be, but I think we all need to get ready for job transitioning.
Yeah, I agree that there's going to be some change, and technology has always brought changes to how we handle things. I appreciate that you all are thinking about these issues, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to work more with the Department of Labor in developing policy that makes sense. Because I have real concerns as a father and as a legislator, as a representative for an area, that we're not going to be prepared for these jobs. I want to make sure that our kids are. So thank you for your testimony today.
We welcome the collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chairman, and hello, Secretary Walker, and to your staff. Thank you for being here today. My question is around the Family Leave Act. I know you heard some of that today. About 4 million workers, according to our statistics in Pennsylvania, don't have access to paid leave through their employer and lose between $10,000 to $12,000 out of their pockets whenever they would need to take this paid leave, which is the money left out of the economy. I would like to know if you could highlight for us some of the financial impacts that you've seen as Secretary of Labor and Industry, and also if the administration themselves supports guaranteeing every working Pennsylvania has access to paid family and medical leave.
So we'd be happy to talk with you about legislation for paid family leave. But as you point out, what it does is sometimes it forces people out of the workforce, which is bad for businesses across Pennsylvania. And it certainly can be a challenge for families, and that it's not good for families when they lose income for a period of time. So we're happy to have these conversations with you.
That's great. I actually also want to talk to you about our college students who are graduating and what the actual goal and strategy is for the state to be able to hold these graduates in place here in Pennsylvania. I know I have 2 college graduates, one and one in May. So I'm going to already count it. but both of them are going to be outside of the state. And so I have hope for the youngest one that still has some time. But what is your strategy, and what do you feel like we can do to continue to have our students stay in place? I did. I just want to say I did. I came here from Baltimore to St. Joe's, and I stayed.
Well, we appreciate that. No, these are great questions, and these are questions that are being considered by the State Board of Higher Education right now. I'm a member of that. How do we keep Pennsylvania college graduates in Pennsylvania? And one of the ways I think that we really need to do that, and we can be really intentional, is to make sure that we are aligning our curriculum with jobs that exist in our communities, and then make sure that we're working with those employers to make sure that we're getting people into internships and externships, and be able to, if you have an internship and you've enjoyed the time with the employer and the employer's enjoyed the worker, that we can keep them in Pennsylvania. So those kinds of work-based opportunities, I think, are really kind of obvious solutions, but ones that we don't really focus on as much as I think we ought to, and we should do more of that going forward.
How closely involved does the department get with helping with these externships and internships?
As far as funding?
Yeah, I like the funding part, and just helping, the universities and employers to be able to get the talent that's here.
Right, so we wouldn't be funding the secondary institutions per se, but there are many different apprenticeship programs that involve some of our community colleges across the state. We have schools to work programs that have dual enrollment college credits. So we're supporting from that perspective. But again, sitting on the State Board of Higher Education, which is really making workforce a key component of its plan going forward, and making sure that we're tying curriculum and jobs at the college level, I think is really how we make sure that we keep people in Pennsylvania and meet the needs of Pennsylvania employers.
That's awesome. And so I'm just going to leave with this plug. Delaware County Community College has just built a beautiful institution right on the edge of my district, and Representative Boyes, and we're so excited because it is solely focused on workforce development. So we look forward to getting that talent out and being in Pennsylvania. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Chairman James.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. I thought Steve was going next. Madam Secretary, panel members, thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to start with a question which I hope will get you thinking about something that, believe it or not, hasn't come up yet today. And it does have an impact on my area out in Venango County in western Pennsylvania, and that's apprenticeship ratios. Today I want to ask you about a regulatory barrier to workforce development opportunities in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's apprenticeship regulations have a standard rule for non-joint apprentice programs of approximately 4 journeymen to 1 apprentice. That is relatively a high amount of supervisor capacity used elsewhere, only in more dangerous industries. Stakeholders have complained that exceptions to this rule are rarely granted. Currently, the average age, according to Google, so it must be true, of the skilled tradesman is about 55 years old. And as a result, the retirements now are greater than the entrance into these various capacities. So can you give us an update from your office on your efforts to engage stakeholders and legislators on how to modernize the apprentice regulations, especially the antiquated current ratio requirement? And can you give your thoughts on which direction we should take? Should we look to the federal government for some help on that, or other states such as Maryland as a model?
So thank you for the question. We're always happy to engage with legislators on topics of interest to working people. As far as the apprenticeship ratios, our Apprenticeship and Training Council meets every month and hears any exceptions. So if somebody thinks that the ratios are not going to work for the apprenticeship program that they want to have registered, they can certainly go before the council to get an exemption, or if they are already registered and are looking to change that, they can certainly ask the council. Council will hear that every month. So appropriate exemptions can be granted that way.
The fact that they are rarely granted, is there something we can do to improve on that? In other words, we're going to run out of skilled tradesmen. And that's actually happening in Venango County. Try to find a plumber. Good luck. That's my concern. And I guess what my takeaway, what I hope your takeaway is, that we begin to think about that and perhaps consider some changes instead of one size fits all. I do have another question. Green light's still on. This has been touched upon already. Unemployment compensation performance benchmarks. In the current fiscal year budget, of course, we've established that the ask is $115 million. That's about 80% higher than 4 years ago. So that's a very significant increase. In the event that it is looked upon favorably, let's put it that way, I want to ask about progress in meeting federal benchmarks. Last year, we came up a little short on 5 of the 6 benchmarks that the federal government has put upon us. So how do you think our UC program is rated right now? Are we in compliance? And are you meeting all the federal target levels? If not, what can we expect to be seeing some improvement in this area? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. I'll have the Deputy Secretary fill in on exactly each of those benchmarks where we are. But the reason I wanted to address also the increase in the funding amount that we're looking for, federal government decreased our allotment last year by $7.7 million. So we're trying to have the personnel improvements that everybody seems to like and want, but still work with an ever-declining federal government budget. So that was the reason for the increase. But I'll have Deputy Secretary Mackes walk you through the benchmarks.
So thank you for the question, Representative. When you look at what I consider to be 2 of the most important benchmarks, which are the first pay timeliness and the non-mon 21-day timeliness, in 2024, Pennsylvania was at 65.4%. In 2025, we were at 76.9%. And we were just above the national average in that regard. And then with the non-mon 21 days timeliness, in 2024 we were at 45.1%, and in 2025, 62.7%. Those benchmarks represent, to me, the most important ones because it's how quickly a claimant gets paid. And those are the ones that we will always work to improve upon. And we do that by ensuring that the performance standards that we've established for our examiners are met. When they are not met, we bring them into the office. They get additional training. We continue to train our staff throughout the year on pain points that we discover through interaction with stakeholders, through looking at our BTQ scores. And given where we were 3 years ago and where we are now, I am confident that we are on an upward trajectory, and I hope to continue that. And at the end of the day, it really is people who make the difference. It's being able to continually staff up, promote people to examiners who can get decisions out quickly and then backfill the interviewer positions, because examiners come from interviewers. So every time we promote a class of examiners, which we do as quickly as we can to ensure that the timeliness benchmarks are met, we need to backfill that interviewer position. But we will continue working to achieve the 87% that the federal government establishes, because at the end of the day, it's real people at the end of those benchmarks. It's how quickly is someone getting their unemployment compensation payment.
It sounds like the trend is a good one, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. And Secretary, thank you so much for your for being here with us today, and to your entire team for your preparation as well. I have a question with regard to a couple scenarios that always come up in our districts across our Commonwealth. And when grant money is given out for construction projects, RCAP funding and the like, we are asked to provide prevailing wage for those workers that work on those projects. Can you explain to me the process for when a construction project in a district or in a community is chosen? How do we verify and make sure that those prevailing wage dollars are going and making sure that that particular rate for work is going to those individuals that are bidding on those contracts and making sure that they're doing the job right?
Right, so our office, obviously, we're not releasing the grants, the RCAP grants, but we oversee prevailing wage. So we have the ability to go onto work sites, check payroll records, review certified records. Employers certify that they're paying appropriate wages to the people identified in exchange for being reimbursed for those wages. So we go on to work sites to be able to run the numbers to make sure the number of workers actually are the people on payroll, those kinds of things. So, we have limited resources to do that, but we are doing this work every day in every county across Pennsylvania.
And when you find a discrepancy in that, what is the process from that point forward?
Well, ultimately, if workers are owed money, we get workers paid, and we fine and sanction employers. And if employers continue to violate the law, they could find themselves debarred from further bids and further projects.
In looking at some of the statistics that we have in front of us for prevailing wage, the complaints that were filed actually went up a little bit from 2020 to 2025, to the end of 2025, but it kind of has plateaued during that middle section. As far as investigators working, where is your complement with investigators, and do you have enough of them to actually answer to the complaints that are being filed?
So we can always use more resources, and right now we have several open positions. We are onboarding new people now and doing training across the state. We want to make sure that we are being as sort of lean and mean as we can be, but we certainly could use more resources in that space. It's just a continuing problem, and the more money that's out there to do infrastructure development, the more we're going to be seeing these kinds of violations.
I appreciate that. One other part that I wanted to mention was the construction workers misclassification. Those numbers have seemed to go up during that same time frame from 2020 to 2025. Are you seeing that the misclassifications taking over and the prevailing wage may not be being paid because of the misclassification? What are those trends that you're seeing within this?
So that's interesting. Complaints are going up in both buckets. So the prevailing, whether or not people are paying prevailing wage, is a different law than the construction workplace misclassification. I don't see a ton, and I can have Deputy Secretary Halleck weigh in, but there doesn't seem to be a ton of misclassifying workers in the prevailing wage space per se. It's more on the work sites where people aren't submitting certified payrolls and things like that, where we see the vast majority of those cases.
All right, thank you for that. And my final question for you, with regard to the Schools to Work program, I'm really pleased to see that the governor's proposing to double that program funding to $7 million. But I want to ask if you could talk about the impact that the program has had, and also what are some of the pathways that this funding has supported.
Yeah, so about 2,300 students, I think, have come successfully out of Schools to Work programs now. And, so these young people who have graduated from these programs are student teaching now. They are working as EMTs. They are doing all sorts of things in the work in their communities that were supported because they got a preliminary look at what that career would be like when they were in high school. And it really makes sure, again, we've heard questions about how do we keep our people in Pennsylvania. I think a lot of families would like to keep their kids in their communities, and ways to do that is to have a robust, literal Schools to Work program. And this has been just a proven success. Unfortunately, we can only award grants to a fraction of the really exciting programs out there. Like I said, right now our programs only touch about 3/4 of the state. I'd like to see this program in every part of the state, in every one of our 67 counties.
Thank you so much. I see my time is expiring, so I just want to thank you for your work in this. I do want to thank you for your work for working families across Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Chairman Struzzi, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris. Again, thank you all for being here. Talking about data centers, workforce investment, the opportunities that will come to Pennsylvania now that we have collectively ended the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative for Pennsylvania. I have some concerns with the workforce readiness, and I appreciate, I think there was a good dialogue this morning on investing in career and tech education, but I really see the need exponentially increasing here dramatically in the next couple of years. And so I'm just looking for maybe more of your thoughts on what we need to do to be prepared. Are we doing enough to be prepared, particularly related to the building trades?
Oh, I really appreciate that, and particularly with respect to the data center space. I think you're right. I think we just have a huge workforce need that's in front of us. And at the department, we want to really focus on making sure that we are funding workforce opportunities, both with respect to data center infrastructure as well as broadband expansion and IT in general. So we just recently, using our schools to work, using our reemployment fund funds, we just issued a $2 million grant, notice of grant availability for northeastern Pennsylvania to really focus on sort of the construction work that would go into the infrastructure of the data center that's anticipated that's being worked on right now in that area. Across the state, we are seeing these kinds of needs. We want to continue to be able to fund workforce grants in that space, both in terms of the building and construction trades to make sure that we're getting that infrastructure built, but then we want to make sure that we have people trained to do maintenance work and do the energy, the electrical work that continues to go on. So we really are trying to have a long-term as well as a short-term perspective as we're looking at that, and certainly this, continuing funding with respect to apprenticeship dollars will really help us in that regard.
Do you work closely with the Department of Education and the Department of Community Economic Development to make sure everything is aligning and moving in the right directions?
We do, and particularly in that sort of data center space, there are, I think there are weekly meetings at this point, weekly meetings with the Office of Transformation and Opportunity, with DCED, PDE. We are working closely. We want to make sure that we are catching everything, right? We don't want to leave any gaps. We also don't want to do the same work twice. So being collaborative, and we're really trying to do this in all aspects of workforce. It's really important that if we're issuing a grant in agriculture, that we're doing that in conjunction with the data points we're getting from our CWIA, that we make sure that we're supporting the DCED investments. We're working with Secretary Redding and his team to make sure that we are actually identifying the real problem and putting dollars where we know we're going to get success.
And then related to broadband, I know we've been talking about this for some time now, and maybe you don't have the answer, but is there a timeline for when we're actually going to fill all the gaps that have been mentioned?
That is a great question. I think that Secretary Sager testified that by 2030 that was all going to be built. I maybe, if I'm incorrect, that was my best recollection.
Okay. And then lastly, just as another follow-up, the fraud numbers that the Deputy Secretary outlined, could you provide those to us?
Yes.
And maybe compare, what it was like, because as you said, the COVID stuff is sort of an anomaly, right? So can we look at maybe before and after and where we are with those fraud numbers and trends?
Sure. It's gotten much, much better.
Good. I agree, and we appreciate that. So, all right, thank you all.
Thank
you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and thank the Secretary and the Department of Labor. We thank you all for being here with us this afternoon for this budget hearing. We also thank you for your flexibility as we had to move around times. We are going to recess, and we'll be back here at 1 o'clock. Oh, no, it's almost 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. We'll be back at 2 o'clock, and we'll have the Department of Education here with us this afternoon. So we'll see everybody back here at 2 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.